Okay, so forgive me for any background noise. I'm sitting by a window, birds are chirping, there's things going on outside. Um, I wanted to do this video. I'm doing this from my phone. I wanted to do this video because I thought this topic was very interesting to me. Sam Darnold and his success in Carolina, and why when he was in New York, mostly everyone thought that he was not as good as advertised. Because if anybody remembers, when Sam Darnold was at USC, he was like how Trevor Lawrence was, or Tua. I mean, a year or two before he went to the NFL, he was projected to be a top pick. Okay, and I'm a huge proponent of a quarterback is only as successful as the organization is invested in them. If your organization is not invested in your long-term success and are not willing to put everything on the line to make sure that you succeed, you won't succeed. Case in point, Lamar Jackson as a success story. When Lamar was drafted, nobody thought he was going to, well, at a certain point during the draft, nobody thought he was going to be a first round pick. Most people thought he'll slip into the second, maybe in the third, but he'll probably be somewhere, like, he won't be lower than third round. But he wasn't going to be a first round pick, even though most people was rooting for him to be drafted number one or in the first round. Baltimore went out on a limb, man. They traded up after already picking Orlando Brown. They traded up and got Lamar Jackson. And not only that, after trying to suffer through Joe Flacco, and once they couldn't do it anymore, they threw Jackson in there. And Jackson, like, the confidence it takes an organization to show you when they trade up to get you. Okay, when they throw you in there well before anybody thinks you're ready to be thrown in there. And then the very next year, they surround you with every piece, every crucial piece that you need to succeed. And not only did he succeed, he won the MVP that year. The confidence, and Baltimore is not a desperate organization. I mean, they've had suspect quarterback play through two of their titles. I know people, well, Joe Flacco, he didn't throw any interceptions doing it. Sure. But anybody outside of that, Joe Flacco was like the poor man's Eli Manning. Okay? Outside of their championship winning seasons, even during their championship winning seasons, during the regular season, they're very average. They're very subpar. That doesn't, just because they win titles does not mean that they're directly responsible for winning the title. When you go back and you look at those Giant teams, I mean, they had a great defense, great offensive line. They had solid weapons around them. Sure, Eli made some pretty great throws, and that's what you would need to win titles. So, same thing for Joe Flacco. Sometimes the stars align, and they just go your way. That does not make him a great quarterback. And Baltimore is known for not having solid quarterback play. So when they finally get a guy who is as special as Lamar is, because don't get me wrong, he is special. They went all in on him. And that might be the greatest decision they've made in a very long time, since drafting Ray Lewis. Greatest decision they've made in a very long time. And it doesn't always work out. You have guys that get drafted number one, or get drafted in the first round before they're ready. You look at Christian Ponder, Jake Locker. You look at Jamarcus Russell. I mean, some might even say Matthew Stafford. I mean, but Matthew Stafford was able to somewhat float above water. He was able to survive despite being a part of a terrible organization and choosing to stay with that organization. I thought once Matthew Stafford's contract was up, once his rookie contract was up, he should have just left Detroit. Because at that point, you realize you're not going to win nothing. I think they still had Megatron at that point. And I think he thought Megatron was going to be around for a while. But y'all still wasn't winning anything. So if I was Matthew Stafford, I'm always, like, the organizations are, I'd rather get rid of you sooner than later, whatever. But Players need to take that approach when it comes to their career. Okay, all right. So I spent 5 minutes in, but the reason why I'm bringing this up is because Sam Darnold was one of those guys who was a highly touted college player who was looked at as a top pick in whatever draft he did declare for, and he went to the Jets. The Jets are a fucking train wreck. They're a train wreck. Terrible organization. Just as bad as Cincinnati. Terrible organization. How can a player that young, with all the coaching turnover that they have, how can a player succeed? I feel bad for Zach Wilson. Because, I know this kid's making a shitload of money, far more than I'm making, but still, man, it's like, to work in those kind of conditions, what an organization that, to be honest, fans might be better at their job than they are. Like, they're terrible. They're bad. How could you expect Sam Darnold to go in that situation where they don't have anything? They didn't have a good defense. The offensive line was... the receivers were iffy. They're getting cast-offs and they're getting, specialty guys. Like, as much as I like Jamison Crowder, man, he was a specialist. Jamison Crowder is not a number one receiver, and we see that. So I don't know how anybody thought that would succeed, but let's listen to this.
The Texans at home. Sam played them on the road. Sam has an awful offensive line. Baker has top one or two offensive lines. That matters.
I fast forward a little bit because he spent the part where I was at. He spent some time talking. So what he's doing is he's comparing, because they both were drafted. Baker was drafted number one in that draft, and Sam was drafted third.
Quarterbacks. Sam not only was on the road, it was a short week, a Thursday night game on the road. Those are tough on road teams. Sam also lost his best player, Christian McCaffrey. His star running back, right? Early second quarter. So despite all those, I went and looked at 3 or 4 things that matter. I went and looked at first downs between the two. I went and looked at passing touchdowns, yards, completions, passing first downs, and third down. And, what do you know? Sam threw for more yards and more yards per completion and had 50% more passing first downs, and his third down passer rating, same defense. Sam actually had a worse offensive line. Sam actually lost his star running back. Sam was actually on the road. Sam was a short week. And Sam's numbers pretty impressive.
This is why a couple years ago, when this whole Cleveland experiment happened, where they just was signing every big name they could, and they were trading for everything that they possibly could, and they were drafting big names, and I wasn't sold on them. I did a video, and I think it was the only video I did that year because I just have a terrible memory with shit like that. But that was the only video that I did as far as predictions go. I predicted week 1 and what I thought would happen during that week 1. And at Cleveland, I believe it was Cleveland and Tennessee. Okay? And I said, I don't believe in Cleveland. And Tennessee is one of the most unpredictable, inconsistent teams in the NFL, where Tennessee they'll either lose by like 10 or 20, and then the very next week they'll come back and they'll either look like one of the worst teams in the league or they'll look like one of the best. And that was right before Tennessee and Derrick Henry, they went on that crazy run and was doing all that damage. And I predicted that I believe Tennessee was going to blow out Cleveland. I didn't expect them to beat them by 30, but I expected them to blow them the fuck out. And what happened? They won by 30. Cleveland is one of those teams that kind of like the Eagles from the early 2010s. Where you just stack this team full of names and that's all it is. And you're hoping that with enough talent and enough star power that somehow they'll figure it out. Because most of these execs that are putting these teams together, they don't really know football. They don't know shit about chemistry. They don't know most of the time I think that these guys, they put these rosters together and they tell the coach, make it work. Cleveland is an experiment that this is the third year that this experiment's been going on, and so far you got to the divisional round. They had a chance to beat the defending champs in the divisional round, and Baker fumbled the fucking ball. How do you fumble against Chad Henne, against that Kansas City defense? That's so terrible. Everybody thinks that defense is so bad. Oh man, that defense is so terrible. How did you not beat them? How could you not take advantage of that opportunity? That's how you could tell great players from average players. And don't get me wrong, man. I think Peyton Manning is a great player. I do. But his career is so far beneath him. Beneath his ability, beneath his expectations. What people thought that this dude was going to do, his career was kind of a disappointment. And I know, that sounds like it's such an inflammatory statement. But you're talking about one of the greatest pre-snap quarterbacks that can pretty much fool your defense into changing itself for absolutely no reason. Like, Peyton Manning is one of the greatest, like, he's literally like one of those old West sheriffs that they're just such a badass, man. They really make you question yourself, doubt yourself. And he's one of those guys. But his career is such a disappointment. I mean, he's won multiple MVPs, you know. His teams have been very competitive for the most part. But you're talking about Tom Brady, and this is before what we see Brady as now. I'm talking mid-2000s Tom Brady versus mid-2000s Peyton Manning, where Peyton was just on a different level. How do you not beat that team, man? Like, how do you get your ass handed to you? Like, I don't understand it. I mean, we can say, well, it's because Belichick is the greatest, and we can say that. But is Belichick the greatest coach of all time? Or is he just the greatest coach of our generation, of the time of our era? Because pre-Tom Brady, Belichick has been disappointing. And so far, post-Tom Brady, he's been disappointing. I mean, sure, doesn't have much to work with, but it was his fault. How do you not beat that team, Peyton? Like, I don't understand it. So, you can tell average quarterbacks from the great ones with what they have to work with, how they approach the game, and how they're able to make it happen. And some quarterbacks can make it happen and some can't. Let's go.
Impressive. Isn't that interesting? And by the way, this is no indictment of Baker Mayfield, but it is interesting, isn't it? When Baker the first 2 years didn't have any support, he was awful. He led the NFL or second in interceptions. He called out the medical staff. He was embarrassing. He was a mess.
And that's what I'm talking about. Like, we're putting way too much onus on this kid, man, who adopted a situation that he could not deal with. That's very relatable. It's not... I wouldn't call him embarrassing. I think the performance of that entire team was livid. Like, I mean, not livid. It makes me livid as a football fan, because it's like, what the fuck? Like, what are y'all doing? Are y'all trying to run a successful organization? You don't have to be successful in winning titles. You don't have to be successful in making money. But it's about entertaining the fans. And I'm pretty sure Jets fans are ready to fucking go harikari all over that stadium. Like, it's crazy.
A little plump. It's one of the reasons they haven't paid him yet. Not quite sure I can handle success. And he was terrible. Then he got a really good coach and a really good offensive line, and now Baker wins games. And Sam was really terrible last year in New York and the year before, with a bad coach and a terrible...
All right, so I think he was talking about Baker that first time. But still, man, like, it's hard to judge a kid. Like, even Baker that first year, his first year there, even Baker, it's hard to... Well, no, you know what? Baker's first year, it was actually his most promising. It's hard to judge Baker that second year. Okay? I think that organization took his opinion a little too a little too serious. I think they put themselves in a bad spot with Freddie Kitchens because, from what I understand, Baker was the one that vouched for Kitchens, that wanted Kitchens there. He wanted Kitchens to be the coach. And that team was a mess. It was disappointing. I think Cleveland took Baker's advice a little too serious. I think they needed to do their job. Bring in the best coach for the team. Because head coaches, I don't know, for some reason they think head coaches are supposed to accommodate the quarterbacks and the quarterbacks only, and just say, say screw the rest of the team.
O-line and bad receivers and no running game. So what does it all mean? It means when Sam and Baker both get a good coach, both get some weapons, pretty good. They can win games. And neither is good enough to overcome crap. Andrew Luck.
How many quarterbacks, not even Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck wasn't able to overcome with that team. I mean, he managed to make it to the conference finals where he got blown the fuck out. But that team was pretty decent when Andrew was there. I mean, it wasn't a slobber knocker or a fucking talent. I mean, but he had some decent running backs. He had some really good tight ends. He had a decent receiver. T.Y. Hilton, early on, I think before the injuries, T.Y. Hilton was one of the top 10 receivers in the NFL. Yes, he was. Yes, he was. Yes, he was. T.Y. Hilton, I can hear it already. T.Y. Hilton was a top 10 receiver. In my opinion, this dude was very productive. Playing alongside Andrew Luck. Yes. And that defense was, Indy has never had a flashy defense with all these big time names. But their defense, for the most part, over the 20 years or so that I've been watching football, their defense has been consistent. They'll either put on some good performances or they won't play so well. But they're never straying into terrible, and they're never achieving greatness. But they'll do just enough. They're kind of like Kansas City's defense, where they're not going to play horrendously bad, and they're not going to play over the top well, but they're going to give you good performances, and they're going to give you not so good performances. And it happens. Let's not act like Andrew Luck was there with a bunch of middle-aged plumbers, man, sitting there trying to run out routes, and they can't even fucking get off the line quick enough. Like this, that doesn't happen. That's not happening. You don't make it to the championship game with that stuff happening. I'm sorry. As much as we like to immortalize Andrew Luck like he was this all-time generational talent, he wasn't. He was looked at it as in college to be a generational talent, but to be honest, man, his career kind of was disappointing. I mean, he was great talent, but he was disappointing, and you could throw some of that on the injuries. But there were times where Andrew needed to be more. He needed to be what they wanted out of Peyton. He needed to be that, and he wasn't. As much as it pains me to say that, because, I really do wish that guy would just get his body back right and try to find a way to come back. But I don't know, man. I think Andrew Luck, his career has been set in stone, and so far it's been disappointing.
Is about the only guy that can in the last decade. That is it. And Sam's not as good as Andrew Luck. He's big like Sam. He played in the Pac-12 like Sam. He's athletic like Sam.
But Sam Darnold hasn't played with, he doesn't have the same team as Andrew had. He doesn't have the same coaching. Andrew Luck was lucky enough to be coached by Bruce Arians. Very quarterback offense, heave it the fuck downfield friendly. And Chuck Pagano, one of the most underrated coaches over the last 10 years, man. I mean, this dude had some great coaching. Let's not act like he didn't. He had great coaching. Maybe his last year in the NFL, he might have been coached by Frank Reich. I would have to go back and look that up. But he's had some really great coaching, man. Let's not act like he hasn't. I I like how we like to change the narrative of a certain situation to fit what it is we're trying to say. But Andrew had a decent team. That's why he was able to succeed as early and as often as he was able to. The Jets didn't have that. We're looking at the Indianapolis Colts now and looking at that shit show now and saying, okay, maybe Andrew had to do with this too. No. I'm sorry. No, he didn't. Maybe the last year or so. And maybe that was the reason why he retired. And look at that offensive line. I mean, most of those offensive linemen that we're looking at like, yeah, Indy has one of the best offensive lines. They were there when Andrew was there. If I have to make a critique on Andrew Luck, I would say that his injuries were self-inflicted. Andrew had a tendency to hold on to the ball a little bit too long. Andrew had a tendency of being a little too erratic with the ball. And Andrew had a tendency of rolling out the pocket and taking on increased damage that he didn't need to take on. That offensive line was good enough to give him enough time to pass the ball. His receivers were fast enough and decent enough that maybe if he just puts the ball where they can catch it, maybe he would save some of that damage done to his body. It's easy to blame the offensive line when these quarterbacks, they get their shit kicked in. It's not as easy to sit there and say, okay, what could the quarterback have done to make this a little easier? Look at Brady. He got that Tampa offensive line looking like one of the greatest offensive lines of all time. You know why? Because he drops back, and within the first 3 seconds of him dropping back, he gets the ball out. Or he's going down. He's trying to minimize the contact that he's taking. He doesn't take unlawful hits, unnecessary hits for no reason. Shit, sometimes players go out of the way to not hit him. Like, there's a way to do things. It may not be the most comfortable. It may not be the most glorious. It may not be the most popular. But it gets the job done. And I think Andrew did himself a disservice by being so John Elway-ish. You know, I really felt like he tried too hard to be John Elway. You know, that gunslinger mentality with that hard-nosed look. I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to run right into that goddamn linebacker or that safety, and I'm not going to care about the consequences. You can't do that. Trying to find your helicopter moment, you can't do it, bro. And he put himself in harm's way far too much. See, this done went from Sam Darnold to my disappointing letter to Andrew Luck. Listen, man. Andrew had more to work with than Sam. And I'm going to end the video here, man, because I kind of got caught up in talking. But I only use the video of these segments to kind of go off of, because it's easier for me to collect my thoughts if I go off of a video. Listen. Sam Darnold is in a situation right now with the Carolina Panthers that he's going to get good coaching. He's going to have good players surrounding him. And, you know, that defense for Carolina is a lot better than people give him credit for. I mean, I'm just saying, you know, given enough time and some more time to adjust to each other, I think that defense has the potential to be a top 10 defense. But we'll see. We'll see. It's only week 2 or week 3. We'll see. So, back to Sam Darnold. Listen, Sam Darnold's going to get some time to prove to people that, listen, I may not be this generational talent that people... Every quarterback that comes out of the draft is a generational talent almost. Like, everybody, like, at least one quarterback every fucking draft is looked at, this is the guy. He's the next big thing. Like every year. Every year. When are people going to sit back and be like, okay, maybe this kid isn't? If they keep saying he is, maybe he isn't. You are far more likely to find a player in each draft that no one talks about, no one thinks about, that is just infinitely greater than this quarterback or this player that everybody keeps talking about. And it happens where far more the unexpected player is far more successful than the highly touted player. And I think that that did Sam a disservice because we're not going off of Sam as being Sam. We're going off of Sam from the perspective that he was a very talked about prospect. He was a highly touted quarterback at USC, one of the biggest schools in the country. You know, it's a quarterback factory. Carson Palmer, Mark Sanchez, the other guy, Matt Leinart, quarterback factory. Okay? So they're going to look at him. They're going to look at him and they're going to, okay, is this dude the next Carson Palmer? You know, is he the next this? Is he the next that? Is he going to surpass these guys? And now we're not looking at him from an objective lens. We're looking at him from, okay, this dude is supposed to be one of the generational talent. I'm not seeing it. So that means he sucks because of what people made me believe about this guy. And that's what sports can do. And this is why people need to stop listening to the media so fucking much. They need to stop listening to these analysts because these analysts' jobs are to draw in the fans or to draw in the viewers. They're not trying to give you actual objective facts most of the time. They're just trying to draw you in, whether it's through ire or actual praise. They're just trying to draw you in. They don't care. And I think Sam, just like so many other players, was done a disservice because they were viewed as a certain thing, and now instead of us looking at them through objectivity, we're looking at them through this glossy, foggy lens of what people made this kid out to be. So I'm rooting for Sam, man. I'm rooting for Sam, and I'm hoping that this stint in Carolina can open something up in this kid that will breed that animal. Okay. Because I think every football player has that animal. It's just whether or not they're in the right situation to unleash it. So we'll see.